This podcast is presented by Skies Magazine. If you're interested in the Canadian aviation industry, Skies is your go-to multimedia resource for the latest news, in-depth features, stunning photography, and insightful video coverage. Whether you're an aviation professional or enthusiast, Skies is dedicated to keeping you informed and bringing your passion for aviation to life. Visit skiesmag.com to learn more and subscribe to stay updated on all things Canadian aviation.
Hey everybody, this is your host Brian Morrison with a quick note. We have decided to start adding a blanket disclaimer for any episode where we interview a high-level officer from the RCAF. We live in a 24-hour news cycle and comments can be overtaken by events very quickly. So to put a time frame on things, this interview was made in late February.
Fuel and ignition switches on. RPM switches set. TD switches normal. Doors and hatches closed. Light out. Strobe light on. Restart check is complete. Clear left. Engineers, start number 2. Starting 2. Wind 31010, Pilot Project Podcast. Clear takeoff. Runway 31 left.
All right, we're ready for departure here at the Pilot Project Podcast, the best source for stories and advice from RCAF and mission aviation pilots, brought to you by Skies Magazine. I'm your host, Brian Morrison. With me today is Major General Chris McKenna, a pilot in the RCAF and the current commander of 1 Canadian Air Division, or 1CAD. Chris, welcome back to the show, and thanks again for being here.
Yeah, thanks, Brian.
So today, for part 3 of our chat with Chris, we're going to finish our talk about the modernization of the RCAF and the new platforms we're bringing online. We're going to talk about the renewed focus of warfighting for 1CAD, and we'll take some questions from the audience. Listeners can check out part 1 to hear about Chris's early career, his tours in Afghanistan, and his time as CO of 450 Squadron. They can check out part 2 to hear about his tour in Mali, his command jobs, and the beginning of our chat on RCAF modernization. So we're going to pick up where we left off and talk about some of the acquisitions coming down the pipe for the RCAF. Now, this next one, I think, is still more of a concept than a actual project or acquisition, but you can clarify that for us. It's the Airborne Early Warning and Control, or AEWC. So let's take a moment to talk about that. What can you tell us about this project?
Yeah, Brian, happy to talk about that. To me, that's an extremely exciting one because it's a new capability for the RCAF. So in my previous job, before I came here, I was doing project work and doing requirements work. And my team and I were the ones kind of writing all the big proposals that were going into the defense policy. And this is one that we carried from sort of concept all the way through to approval. So it is a project. It is approved. There is a lot of money behind it.
Okay.
That's been announced. And so we will be able to acquire this capability ideally by the mid-2030s. So a project team is being stood up. You recall that the Our North Strong and Free strategy was released in April. And this is one of the 2 larger Air Force projects that were approved there. Why do we need this? And so in my current role as a commander of Canadian NORAD region, one of the biggest challenges I have is I need an AWACS-like aircraft to do the job. If you look at when we deploy decisively to do a mission to the 10 or 12 or 2 o'clock in North America, and we are countering an adversary who's coming towards us, there's the critical thing we need is an AWACS type aircraft or an AEWC aircraft. And maybe important for listeners to understand why. So a fighter radar, think of it like a flashlight beam. Like if you're going to walk into a dark Walmart and you want to see what's in front of you in a big room, you turn your flashlight on. Right inside that flashlight, you're going to see a certain amount of things. That's like a fighter radar, very high power, but very focused on a certain area. An AEWC aircraft is a much more powerful radar. That's why you need a big wing aircraft to do this. It generates a lot more power through its generators. You can push more radar energy out through the primary sensor, the radar on the roof of the jet. And so that radar energy gives you a 360 view of the world, and it gives you typically radar resolutions that are for much smaller radar cross-section targets. You can find things like cruise missiles or drones or balloons, for example. And so having that ability from an AWC aircraft to have pretty much triple the range of what a fighter would give you allows you to optimize where the fighters are controlled and moved to, and you can task them on to the threat, and it gives them a lot more warning in terms of what kind of work and threat they can expect. Additionally, that kind of aircraft, in the current context, can control long-range kill chains. That is to say, if you were to fire a cruise missile or an air-to-air missile, advanced versions of those, you can control them over much longer distances because of the radar energy you're going to be using and the data links you're going to be using that would be different on an AWC than you get on a fighter. So from my point of view, from the air defense point of view, we've always relied on the fact that we have Canadian crews in U.S. units flying U.S. AWACS.
Right.
The challenge now is that the AWACS is at the end of its life, and it's starting to not be as available as often as we need it to be. And so I think it's time now for us to have our own and to stand up on our own for the capability.
So are we going to be leveraging the fact that we've had Canadians serving in AWACS as we kind of stand up our own fleet?
Yeah, I think that is the play. It's not, the analysis is not fully done yet. So we have to have a good look at the size of the squadron. So nominally it's 6 to 8 aircraft. I think the discussion is it one squadron in one place, or is it divided? Is it co-located with fighter squadrons or not? So I think we still have a fair bit of analysis to do on what this looks like. But we do have a lot of expertise. We have a lot of air battle managers who've been serving in Elmendorf or in Tinker Air Force bases in the US or in NATO AWACS over in Europe in Gallagherkin. And so we do have a fair number of folks with that expertise, and we can invest them into this project.
Okay. What are the potential aircraft in the running for this role?
So, yeah, we haven't gone into the request for proposals phase or anything, and this is going to be up to the commander of the Air Force and his project teams, or his force development teams, to do that. There's sort of 3 that I'm aware of that have been looked at. One, probably I would say the standard in NATO and US and 5i right now is the E7 Wedgetail, E7A Wedgetail. It's a Boeing product. That was co-developed by the Australians and the Americans circa 2010, 2012.
Okay.
And they've been working on that for quite some time. The Australians have an operational squadron, 2 squadron, that they fly out of RAAF Williamtown. And that is a 6 aircraft squadron, about 250 people with some contracted maintenance. And so that squadron delivers that effect for Australia, but they have become the nucleus for the U.S. acquisition of the E7A, and they are training U.S. crews as the U.S. starts to procure that exact jet. Very recently, NATO did a competition, and they selected E7A as well from Boeing. But there's 2 other contenders right now, both of which are based on Bombardier aircraft base vehicles. The first is the Saab GlobalEye, which has an area radar on its roof. It's a dorsal bar radar.
Okay.
And very, very good, very powerful radar, in addition to a whole suite of electronic support measures and surface search radars on the bottom. So it's a bit of a multi-mission aircraft that does more than just AEWC. Smaller, less power, but has been picked up by a number of countries, notably Sweden, because they manufacture it, and I believe the UAE. And then there's a third contender, which was sort of offered by L3 Harris and Bombardier into the Korean competition, recent Korean competition, South Korean.
Okay.
And I don't know if there's a name for it yet, but it has cheek radars that are currently in use by, I believe, Israel and Italy, that could be integrated onto a Bombardier chassis. And that's a live discussion. I don't have the name handy, though, unfortunately.
Okay. I mean, that is interesting, too, because obviously Israel is pretty well constantly actively using their military, so they know their stuff for sure.
Yeah, so I think the key challenge is making sure, from a Canadian context, the things that I've said are really important for this. One is the sensor acuity matters a lot, because if we're going to be up in the Arctic and have to look a long way. 2 is power. The amount of power you can push through that sensor, I think, is extremely important. And then 3, from a Canadian perspective, we must have an air-to-air refuelable aircraft, in my view, as an operational commander. Not so much so because I need it to be airborne for 25 hours or something like that, because that's kind of a punishment on the crew. It's more about you may have to bounce this aircraft through places like Inuvik, Iqaluit, Yellowknife. And I think about Inuvik and the fact that you can sort of drink a small town dry of fuel. And so you want to be able to launch at min fuel, hit a tanker, then stay airborne, and take that fuel from a tanker as you press forward to conduct your patrol. And that's right. I'm much more cognizant of the scarcity of fuel in the Arctic than I am of the need for these really long missions.
So basically, like, try to leave that as a reserve for when it's really needed.
Exactly. Yeah, and then fighters will eat up that fuel too, right? And the town relies on it in the Inuvik context as well. So we have to get after some upgrades there. We can talk about that after.
Okay, for sure. You mentioned the squadron in Australia flying the Wedgetail. Would that be also a likely site for us to train up our crews if we end up going with that option, or is that just too far in the future to know what we do for now?
I think it's too far in the future. Like, no one has made a decision on which aircraft it's going to be for Canada, and that's certainly, I think, a live component of the options analysis. It's now ongoing. I will say that if you look at the P8, we're going to talk about that in a minute, we are relying on our allies quite a bit. So on the US and on the Brits for the P8 and potentially the Australians, we're still in talks with them. But because they are ahead of us, they've recapitalized or acquired earlier than we have. We are able to leverage the fact they have a mature training system, they have simulators, and they have a training plan, so you can leverage them. And and similarly, they have leveraged us in the past when they were behind the 8 ball. So the Brits put a bunch of their acousticians into Canadian maritime patrol squadrons because they lost, unfortunately, their Nimrods for about 10 years.
Yeah, I worked with several of the British acousticians. They're amazing people. They're so switched on. They're amazing at their job, and they're just wonderful people.
Agreed.
Let's roll right into that discussion then on the P8. I was super excited last year when the RCAF announced that we were purchasing the P8A Poseidon to replace our aging CP-140M Aurora fleet. Now, the Aurora, also known to the world as the P3, has been the best in the business for anti-submarine warfare, or ASW, for a long time. How will the P8A improve on how we conduct ASW and long-range patrols?
I became a bit emotionally tied to the P8 because I was running the project side of that and getting that through the procurement wickets. The fact of the matter is that the P3 or CP-140 has given us yeoman service in Canada. I believe it's been in service since about 81.
Yep.
And so we are talking about an aircraft that is over 40 years old, and there's only so many pressurization cycles an aluminum tube can take. And so at a certain point, we're kind of at the end of that cycle, and we need to recapitalize, and we needed to do it in the near term. So the key argument for acquiring a replacement was really the obsolescence challenge and what is ready in market right now for us to pivot to. So that's number one. I think number two is the 5I is an extremely important intelligence sharing arrangement, but it's also an allied partnership that we rely on really heavily. In my last job, I was the Canadian head of delegation for the Air Force's Interoperability Council. So all the standards we use for weapons and fueling and servicing is aligned inside the 5I. It's usually anchored on a NATO standard, but we have some things that are inside of 5I only. And so as this airplane, with Canada procuring it, is the only true 5I airplane. New Zealand, Australia, Canada, UK, US all operate P8s. So New Zealand just got theirs recently. I think the big advantage is one, speed. So you think about Canada, our maritime patrol bases are sitting on the coasts, but the place we might need to get to is probably far away. Even if it's the middle of the Atlantic or in the sort of North Pacific, it's probably far away.
Yeah.
The P8 offers about 100 knot speed advantage as a 737-800 base vehicle. It also is a fully networked and censored aircraft, and it's fully tested. The pressure hull, there's been lots of modifications to it. But the key factor for me was power generation, the ability for excess cooling, and then a whole lot of excess volume in the airplane. So you have it's a big airplane, a little bit bigger than the P3 or the CP-140. There's room for growth in the sense that you could add mission systems and add sensors to it. We're going to operate this, I'm sure, for the next 40 or 50 years. We wanted to make sure we had a growth path in whatever airplane we acquired. And I think that's really important for this. I am not an ASW expert. I think, Brian, you probably are.
I don't know if I'd call myself an expert, but I know a thing or two about it.
Compared to the Sonobuoy, it's a different system that they use, but it is aligned entirely to the 5I. And why is that important? Very often, if we're tracking an adversary submarine as it comes across the Atlantic, you know this quite well, we will take a handover from the UK at some point, and we will give a handover to the US at some point. Similarly, you could argue the same on the Pacific coast as you get towards Hawaii and you start working towards the Indo-Pacific outside the second island chain. So I think the interoperability, interchangeability of tactics and training, weapon systems, and most importantly, how we exchange information with each other at the speed of relevance, be able to make rapid decisions and hand tracks of interest off between each other.
Yeah, interoperability, the advantages of that, it's hard to overemphasize that. Like, for example, we've had times where we're working out of the UK hunting Russian submarines. And it's in the papers, just for any listener out there who's worried about OPSEC or operational security, there's newspaper stories about this, so I won't get specific, but we're a team. We're out there, we're handing off, like Chris said, we're handing off to Americans, we're handing off to French crews sometimes in their Atlantiques, and now we'll be handing off to British crews as well in their P8s. So having that same aircraft is going to be huge. Also, as a pilot, from my perspective for planning, knowing that the base you're going to, like in the past, flying a P3 and having it be so prolific, you would go to a base and know, okay, well, they fly P3s out of there. So I know the concrete or the asphalt is stressed for these tires. I know they are going to have the equipment we need to service the aircraft. I know we can borrow parts from other NATO countries. So there's a whole ton of big and small advantages for that.
Yeah, and then the other thing for the P8 I would emphasize is lethality. So the aircraft's going to show up with Mark 54 torpedoes, which we were in the process of upgrading to in the P3 or the CP140. So that's great. It sort of sets us up with the latest, greatest airdroppable lightweight torpedo. The second aspect is the aircraft has, we call BRUs or bomb rack units on the wings, and you're able to employ a long-range air-to-surface weapon. And so as part of this project, in scope is a long-range powered subsonic cruise weapon that is meant to be a maritime strike weapon. And do I think we're going to have to use this in anger? No, I really hope not. But if you want to be credibly deterring an adversary, you need to have hard power to do that. And so a reintroduction into that fleet of long-range air-to-surface maritime weapons is dramatically required given the state of the world right now.
Well, especially because with the Aurora, we were practicing for doing RMP or recognized maritime picture missions where we would map out enemy fleets, and you're essentially feeling your way in, hoping you don't go into any of the threat ranges, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
If you're going to put yourself there anyways, you may as well actually have the weapon to do the business and not just be there for someone else to launch theirs.
Yeah, and conversely, if you have the right weapon with the right level of range, you can actually stay outside of an adversary weapons engagement zone and strike.
Right.
And that's where I would like to be. I don't want to put our crews in a fair fight. I want to put them in an unfair fight where we're going to win.
Yeah, totally agree. One of the strengths of the Aurora is its ability to shut down multiple engines if required to save fuel and fly low to the ocean while tracking a submarine. Now, obviously, the turbofan engines on a P8 are not as efficient down low, which has been a chief complaint amongst naysayers. How will the P8 overcome this limitation?
So again, not an ASW expert. And so what I get from the fleet is the tactics are just fundamentally different in the way that you approach tracking and prosecuting a submarine. There is, for higher risk situations, because there is surface air weapons that are capable from submarines that you need to be cognizant of. There is Hawk kits, which allow a glide path for a torpedo. And again, that's a bit fantastical, I get, for some of the folks who've done this for 40 years. Again, not an expert, but allows you to have standoff. The whole thing's about having the airplane stood off, and at very least using it as an ISR platform. I think the much larger array of sonobuoys that you would lay down allow you to see a much larger column of water from an acoustics point of view, and that altitude is actually an advantage in that case. I understand that there are tactical advantages to prosecuting things low level that you may not have with this system, but I believe the path to upgrade to a Block 2 aircraft, which is something we can discuss, will certainly enable even more of that high level tactical regime.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing too about flying low is you fly low and the crews get sick, and if the crews are sick, you can't do your job. So you only really fly low when you have to anyhow, to be honest.
Okay, that's good. Yeah, I learned something today. Thanks.
Yeah. You were mentioning that Block 2 upgrade. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Well, I just think so. The U.S. is on a path right now to conduct. So we are procuring Increment 3 Block 1 aircraft, and I believe we're going to be receiving Fleet Release 115 aircraft. That's still, I think, being debated, but that is the software sort of release you're going to get, which is, I would call it like the final production variant of the P8 that you can acquire. And the line is going to close, I think, soon. The U.S. has bought a few more aircraft. Germany, I think, is in the mix for some more aircraft, or at least they were when I last left my job. So at a certain point, you're going to have to upgrade and modify the aircraft, and the U.S. is already working on what that upgrade spiral looks like. And so, from my point of view, the best way I've had it described to me is signals intelligence for anti-submarine warfare. So a whole bunch of different sensors that you would add and improve processing that would allow you even greater lethality and operability, survivability for that fleet.
Okay, man, I got to tell you, I'm jealous of the people who are going to be flying this aircraft. I had a chance years ago to go up in a P8 with the Americans, and they let me fly it around just a little bit, and it was really a sweet little aircraft to fly. Like having a HUD and everything is so nice. It's just super modern. It's also super quiet. Like I've got tinnitus. Most, I mean, we know that a ton of people in the military have tinnitus, and certainly there are people with in certain trades that have it much worse than aircrew. But the Aurora was a loud aircraft, and the P8 is super quiet. It's super comfortable. It's an airliner, right? So like at its core, it's obviously been heavily modified, but it's a great aircraft. And all this new bells and whistles are going to get. I just think the game is going to change so much, and it's going to be really cool.
Yeah, I think crew comfort's actually a big deal. Like if you want to have if you're going to be pushing a Canadian crew to go do a 14-hour crew day to patrol the approaches to North America, they're going to be a hell of a lot more effective by the end of that if they've not been subjected to the kind of noise levels that you and I lived in our early careers. I agree with you totally.
Yeah, it'll be a huge fatigue reducer for sure. The next one I want to talk about is really interesting. It was fairly recently announced that the RCAF was acquiring MQ9B SkyGuardian RPAS system, RPAS being remotely piloted aircraft system. First of all, why do we need an uncrewed ISR platform when we have both the Aurora and the Vigilance?
Yeah, that's a good question, Brian. And so we're going to be calling it the CQ9B Guardian aircraft. And two of them are already under construction. The commander of the Air Force flew down to San Diego and signed them about 4 months ago. Why do we need it? There is such a lack of ISR, intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance capability right now that we need multiple layered systems to actually look after the gigantic 10 million square kilometer landmass that we have. You know, Canada has 245,000 kilometers of coastline if you take all the small islands that are up in the archipelago added up. So that's a lot of coastline to surveil, and 14 to 16 P8As are not going to be likely enough to do that. And so there's a couple of big advantages with a remotely piloted aircraft, and there's some neat changes that Canada has made to this that allow it to be a bit more useful in the Arctic. But the key one is 28 to 30 hours of endurance. And so you could see 3 crews rotating through that one launch as they come on shift, take the airplane, execute their mandate for 8 hours or whatever, and then hand it over to the next crew, So one, there's a real efficiency to it. It's extremely fuel efficient as compared to, say, a P8. So I think it'll allow us to do broader ISR in areas that are very austere, and queue assets to go and look at something that heavier like a P8. I think also the lack of ability to get into the Arctic routinely, this will solve some of that, where we can have a more enduring presence, eyes and ears. And I say that on purpose because there is the ability to listen with this aircraft as well. There are malign adversary ships from China and Russia pushing towards the Arctic all the time. This will allow us to actually see them and listen to what they're doing on a more routine basis. The aircraft is being adapted to the Canadian context. So for one, flight and known icing, and then having a sense and avoid capability, what we call a due regard radar, that allows you to integrate that aircraft like a WestJet 737 into the airspace structure. So you'll just file and fly, take off, get in airways, and you will bounce up to where you need to get to and execute your mission set. And so, the airplane is going to be quite advanced. It's not the MQ9 of the 2010s. It's also been adapted for the fact that above about 70 degrees north, you lose the geostationary command links you would rely on. We did an experiment a couple years ago and sent a General Atomics test aircraft north from North Dakota, went all the way to about 70 north, and then it autonomously turned around because it lost its command link.
Okay.
So you need something else up there, which is low Earth orbit satellite vehicles to control it. And that's what we're adapting the aircraft to.
That's really interesting. So I think we've talked a little bit about this, but what is RPAS good for, and what limitations does it have?
Well, it's good for, I think, you think about the term op-limpid. You've probably heard that. Yep. We use that to do sort of sovereignty patrols in the Arctic and in the approaches to Canada off our coasts. It's a bit of a mind-numbing thing for an Aurora crew to go do. You're droning around, you're looking for vessels of interest, you're hailing them, you're confirming that their flag it matches their registration, it matches their transponder, that kind of thing. I hate to say it, but that's kind of mundane work that you could probably do very easy out of an MQ9, because you'll have the ability to communicate from it. So you can do line of sight comms with anything you see on the ground, VHF, UHF, and you'll have SATCOM if that makes sense for that context. And you think about, you could also do search and rescue, or search anyways. That's kind of a mundane task, searching something, looking at the surface of Canada. This is a perfect platform for that kind of thing. I do think it's going to do a lot of work in the Arctic, and I keep saying that. I know it's on the coast, so there's a maritime role for it too that I can get into, but it's going to have a lot of maritime domain awareness, I believe, up to the 10 and 2 o'clock in North America. And this is going to spend, because of its endurance, it can spend a lot of time in the Arctic, and it's very easy to turn it through Arctic infrastructure. So you think about the Nuvik. The Nuvik, we have a hangar there now, procured last year. We could store it in a hangar, launch out of that hangar. We're likely going to build some more multi-use hangars across the Arctic that it could bounce through. And all it really needs is a runway and taxiway and a catch team to get it into a hangar. So you're talking about, half a dozen people to be able to catch and turn that airplane. And then you have 28 hours endurance from there, which now gives you the ability to reach the North Pole, etc.
Wow. So does it have any kind of significant limitations where you would want to use crewed ISR aircraft?
So self-protection, so you want to be careful into what threat environments you insert the aircraft, because right now it is not heavily defended. And so it is, permissive. You want to have a permissive air environment to operate in, or at very least understand where your risk space is and honor that highest risk. I think if you arm it, and it's armable, you can put Hellfire and Laser JDAM on this aircraft, probably for more expeditionary roles, not so much for the domestic role.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, the weight penalty is significant. And so you lose endurance based on the weight penalty. But, Hellfire is actually quite a light weapon. So even in an expeditionary context, extremely accurate and low collateral damage weapon. So we will have the ability to sort of support Canadian troops on a mission like Afghanistan or in Iraq, that kind of thing, which I think is key, or support our special operations soldiers, operators overseas. I think this is going to be game-changing for them. They will have eyes and ears above them, and they will have the ability to strike using a pulse-coded laser off of the RPAS aircraft.
Yeah, that was something I was going to bring up, the fact that the MQ9 can be armed to engage targets on the ground. I think that, like you said, it's going to be a game changer. It'll fill a bit of a capability gap. It's good to have fighter aircraft above a target, but there are times, I assume, where it's better to just have a small RPAS overhead, and probably times where it's just more realistic to have that access to that.
Yeah, if you have a very permissive air environment, I can tell you it's a very efficient way to apply close air support, because you have a team, you have a sensor operator, you have a pilot. In our parlance, we'll have a third crew member called them. It's being discussed if it's going to be a TACO or a mission intelligence coordinator. Be a third crew member sort of manages the mission. That is really important. Your workload will be low. You'll be able to execute that very high risk mission set, I think, very calmly, very easily from an air conditioned control center back in Ottawa.
Yeah, and also we've already talked about this a little bit, but the playtime you said is 30 hours or so.
Yep.
Compared to a fighter having a few hours, and then they need to either RTB, return to base, or refuel. So, I mean, that's going to be a big advantage as well.
Yeah, and the aspect I really haven't gotten into yet, but we've actually, there's a couple of things. We put some electronic support measures on, so some passive sort of listening just to protect the aircraft from, whatever malign actors. We also have a sea spray radar on it, which allows you to get a recognized maritime picture as you're surveilling coastlines. So you'll be able to pick up primary returns on targets using an ISA radar, which is extremely important in my view. I mean, there's weather radar and there's dew regard radar on the aircraft, but this is a sea spray maritime search radar that is all about looking at the littoral, like that is to say the coastal regions, and surveilling large swaths of sea. So I think that will be complementary to the P8 mission set, because we can't be everywhere at once. And I certainly do think this is going to be a game-changing aircraft for domestic ISR.
Yeah, well, that we can use more of it because we currently contract some of our ISR work out to, for example, PAL. Not that that's a bad thing, but obviously that means we don't have enough to do it all ourselves. So more is going to be better.
I agree. And there's a lot of interagency support that you can provide here for the RCMP. If you think about how isolated they are, they have a lost person up there for a GSAR type mission, you can support it. And we will soon start using the new 295 aircraft. And there's a radar on it, and eventually, hopefully, a cell phone detector and EOIR camera. And all those things help you find people faster. You have a lot of that actually already on the MQ9 as well. So that will be something I think will be key, is GSAR, aeronautical SAR, maritime SAR of the search phase can be really, I think, heavily helped with an MQ9.
It sounds like it's going to be in high demand in a lot of different areas.
Yeah, I think it will be. I think the challenge for us is going to be managing. It's anchored against three orbits. We call it three orbits. So 324/7 aircraft in the air is what you can manage, and you can track from start to finish an entire Northwest Passage transit of a commercial ship, for example, is the reason we bought 11 of these aircraft to put them on the two coasts. And we know which forward operating locations we can bounce through, that we can keep eyes on the Northwest Passage. That was one of the big vignettes we used as we sort of showed why we needed certain high-level mandatory requirements for the airplane. And I think it's super important to be able to have custody over that piece of water and that piece of Canada.
Awesome. So let's move on now to discussing, we've talked a little bit about air-to-air refueling. Let's talk about the new CC330 Husky. Canada has also begun acquiring this CC330 Husky multi-role tanker transport, or MRTT. Why do we need these when we currently have the CC150 Polaris?
Yeah, the Polaris is an old airplane now. There's only 19 A310s, which are the base vehicle for it, flying in the world today. I believe there's only one simulator left, or one simulator complex left in Germany that we rely upon. The airplane right now has given us good service, but it is getting quite old. And it's probe and drogue only. So just to bring the listeners up, there's two sort of modes of air-to-air refueling. One is called probe and drogue. That's like a hose coming off the back of an airplane with a basket. You've got like a little probe that you plug into that. So an F-18 uses that. Many of the European aircraft use probe and drogue. All the British aircraft, for the most part, use it. French aircraft. And then there's boom, which is how the U.S. boom receptacle, they call it. It's how the U.S. Air Force refuels its airplanes. And it's like you have a sort of a gas cap on the back, typically behind the cockpit, and you get in position behind a boom tanker, and they fly the boom down, and they plug into you, and they give you gas. And so those two modalities are really important, because right now Canada, because we're an F-18 nation, we only had probe and drogue. So if a U.S. Air Force F-16 showed up, or an F-22 showed up, an F-35 showed up, we couldn't give them gas. So we were of no use to them, quite honestly, in the NORAD mission set. Very awkward, because we operate historically for the last 40 years, 45 years, a naval aircraft, the F-18. So for us, a couple things. In NORAD right now, we are supported by American KC-135 tankers on the two coasts that have a modification off their boom to be able to give gas to our Hornets. And the U.S. has held that standby for Canada for quite some time. And so the reason we argued quite hard to get more aircraft in this procurement was to subsume the U.S. Lines of task and stand on our own for our own air defense. So we will not be reliant on U.S. tankers. And I think that's really important. Second is the 330 is based on an A330. So the CC330 Husky is going to be our new multi-role tanker transport capability, probe and drogue and boom refueling. So we'll have two wing pods, each with a basket and a hose, and then one single boom off the tail. The capacity of that aircraft is almost double.
Oh, wow.
What a CC-150 could give you. So as an example, I can drag 3 to 4 Hornets across the Atlantic in one shot using a Polaris. I could drag 6 F-35s across using a CC-330. So the ability to project power and sustain that air power forward is dramatically increased. The second piece on the 350 is the 330, is that we are going to be establishing 2 main operating bases. I'm not sure if your readers or your listeners, had noticed this, but we announced that Edmonton will be the western main operating base, and we will be holding a response posture there, short notice, sort of scramble to the airplane and launch. Same thing in Trenton. We're building an alert facility in which the jet will sit, and you'll be able to launch on a scramble for the NORAD mission set. And then additionally, we'll have 2 more lines of task for domestic and for force generation to get fighters to go and do fighter things in their fighter ranges and to sustain them. And then obviously the aircraft, it's a multi-role aircraft, so there's no reconfiguration required between tanker mode and transport mode. And so as delivered, when we get all the aircraft in our fleet, we will have, I believe it is 269 passenger seats in the jet. It will have a Link 16 JREAP Charlie, which is a beyond line of sight connection for having Link 16, which is how you get a data link picture of what the threat is around you. You have essentially all the feeds from fighters and radars and stuff that give you what's going on around you, and secure voice, and then a self-protection suite. So the aircraft can launch and recover in areas where you might have a bit of elevated threat. So it really gives us a game-changing sort of upgrade. So right now we operate 2 CC-150T tankers. We will have 8 CC330s that have double the capacity. So
Wow.
I often say we have an 800% increase in our air-to-air refueling offload capability, which is really not insignificant.
No, that's huge.
It's amazing. I will say our allies are more excited about Canada's acquisition of this capability than pretty much any other one.
I believe it, especially from our NORAD commitments. That's going to be such a huge game changer. Like, it sounds like to me what the 150 is to, say, using a Herc as a refueler, the 330 is to the 150. Like, it's just that next step up in capability.
It's a good analogy. And so the interesting part of this project is we were able to get authorities to acquire used aircraft because they were very gently used aircraft from Kuwait Air. During the pandemic, they were put in preservation, so they weren't even really being flown. Very low hours aircraft. So we got 5 used, I believe, and then we're buying 4 new. Of the 5 used that we've acquired, 3 of them are actually now in service. We just put RCAF paint scheme on them, had the A and B checks done, like all the big maintenance done on them before they were delivered, and then put secure comms in them. And so now we are flying those all over the world right now. And I have a bunch of our crews now have gone to the UK with a contract with Air Tanker. They've conducted their conversion across from the A310 to the A330, which I'm told is not that big a jump from a cockpit point of view. It's obviously the airplane's different, but cockpit's similar. And now we're flying them routinely. We're flying the Prime Minister around in it. We're flying our troops to Latvia, meeting our ships in ports all over the world with the airplane. It was a very easy transition into service, and now we have a bunch of crews who are now experienced, able to make that next jump into being tactical tanker pilots.
Wow, what a huge advantage that's going to be in force projection. That's going to be really, really awesome to see those getting used.
Yeah, I agree. It also has, when you get a tanker mod in it, they modify a cargo deck for you as well. So you can actually move pallets with it, which is not something that's easily done. And there'll be a number of, I think it's 7 463L pallets that you could put in the aircraft and move around the world. So you can just imagine the medevac opportunities there, like the resupply opportunities are pretty significant.
That's quite significant, the ability to kind of have some flex in the mission set that aircraft can perform. That's going to be huge.
Yeah, agreed.
So the next one that I want to talk about has long been in the works. It has been canceled and uncanceled. Politics aside, why is the F-35 the best fighter for Canada?
So, the F-35 is a game-changing capability. And the challenge on the 35 is that a lot of the advantages that it offers are not available for public consumption. There's all kinds of rhetoric in the media space. They try and inject what they think the airplane can do. There's a number of RCF folks who were fully right into the program, and I can tell you a couple things. One, we're later in the game to join the program, so the developmental spirals that have occurred to this point have been on the backs of many of the other customers. Canada kind of swooped in near the mature moment, and we'll be getting Lot 18 Block 4 aircraft, which is sort of the final production variant, for lack of a better term. A couple big things is you get a couple of extra missiles that actually nest inside of the bomb bay. So you actually are a more lethal aircraft. All the software's been updated, radar's been upgraded. So we're at kind of that sweet spot moment, irrespective of all the politics. We're at a great moment in terms of acquiring the airplane. There's a lot of sensors on it, and it's the sensor fusion, which is really the juice, is being able to take all different feeds from all different kind of areas passively and sucking them into a fusion engine to be able to present to you in like a single sheet of glass what the threat is and how you can weave around that threat. And so your ability in this jet, because of its low observability, or you use the term stealth sometimes, in addition to its integration of sensor, which is quite honestly unparalleled anywhere else, allows you to take that jet into very high risk areas and know that it's going to be survivable. So from my point of view, we're the ones who generate these fighter pilots and put them out in harm's way on behalf of Canada. I feel giving them that jet like this, we tell them that we care about them. We tell them that we care if they're going to live through the next conflict. And we tell them that winning matters. We care if you win. And we are giving you an opportunity to enter into a fight that is unfair because you have an advantage over the adversary. Mm-hmm. And this jet truly gives you an advantage, not a sales pitch, truly gives you an advantage over the adversary. You look at the world today, the adversary can kind of come from anywhere. And I am really excited about getting this on our ramp and in the air for the RCAF.
When are we hoping to have the F-35 reach IOC, or initial operational capability, and what will be the biggest challenge as we move to that point?
Yeah, so that is the current focus of a lot of effort right now, is to get ready for this airplane. And it's not just the hangars and the ramp space, etc. There is massive construction going on both in Bagotville and in Cold Lake right now to get the fighter squadron facilities off the ground and built, and to get the ramps ready for these hangarettes that are going to be hosting these aircraft, like taxi-through hangarettes. The key one is one, standing up the training enterprise. So that's what we're in the midst of right now. And so the way it works is as part of our acquisition, we are going to be sending a number of instructors down to the States, and the U.S. Air Force gives you a half squadron of instructor pilots. They give you, call it 10 U.S. Air Force qualified F-35 fighter pilots. You bring 10 Canadian F-18 pilots who will now conduct their transition across, and they will now serve as our instructors. These are very experienced fighter pilots that will be sent down there. We've already picked the first 10. They know they're going.
Okay.
Summer of 26, going down to Luke Air Force Base in Phoenix, Arizona. And they will, with their families for 3-ish years at least, to stand this up. And so from 26 to 27, they will be conducting their conversion and getting that training enterprise up, because underneath that also is complete U.S. maintenance in behind those jets. And the way it works is our first aircraft, I believe first 8 aircraft, will be delivered to Luke Air Force Base to that training unit, which is Canada-US Command. And we will fly and teach with our jets, with our livery, with an RCAF roundel on the back from Luke for years. They will be down there training our pilots. In 27, the plan is to push our first cadre of students through who will come in, qualify on the F-35, and then come home. And so the idea is so we think the first jets are going to show up in Phoenix late 26, and we believe the first jets are going to come at late 28, early 29 to Canada, with an IOC in and around 29.
Okay.
Intent is to receive them in Cold Lake, and we are building the infrastructure to receive them in Cold Lake first.
Okay, so still some time to go, but the training is actually going to start pretty soon.
Yeah, we are, it's 2025, right? So we're about 18 months away from our first fighter pilot showing up in Phoenix and getting into an F-35, hopefully by the end of the calendar year of 2026.
What do you think the biggest challenges will be as we move to that point?
So, we haven't talked about the maintenance enterprise at all, but that is a separate line of effort. So all of our maintainers in and around 27 are going to be going down and conducting the conversion onto the F-35 down at Eglin Air Force Base, and then they come home. And then eventually, obviously, these schools will get repatriated to Canada, but the first cadre has to go to the States. So that's one, is making sure that we have the maintenance cadre and processes, and it's different. The jet is fully digital. There's all sorts of systems around the jet that allow it to be maintained like a 5th-gen aircraft, and so our crew force needs to get up to that point. But the second one, I think the largest one, is infrastructure readiness. In the end, Joint Project Office and Lockheed have to certify your facility to hold the airplane, and it's kind of like a vault in which you park an aircraft. And so all the way through the construction, they are inspecting, and there's different phases to the inspection and certification to allow you to go to the next phase to continue to build. And it's how all of the partners in the program, and there are many, have done their infrastructure build. And in Canada, there's only so many secret cleared welders, right? So you have to get a large team together to build one of these facilities. It's in the many hundreds of people to put a fighter squadron together. And so that's what we're going to have an influx of a pretty large industrial workforce into both of our fighter bases in the next couple of years.
Okay. So our next topic is the renewed focus on warfighting for 1CAD. You want to refocus 1CAD on core warfighting skill sets across all of our fleets, with a particular focus on improving lethality, interoperability, and survivability. What do these terms mean to you?
Yeah, thanks. That's very topical for me. So if you watch our new Chief of Defense Staff, she's not only really new because she's been in the job since last summer. Like her second day in the job, she came out and said something I think was a bit controversial, that she expects that Canada will be in a force-on-force conflict with an adversary. Didn't name which adversary, but in the next 5 years. It's a bold statement to make for a Chief of Defense, and super proud of her for saying that. I agree with her. And so that's where I think I have a mandate here, at least in the operational side of the Air Force, to make sure we are ready when that goes. And my own commander has told me I need to get ready for a continental defense relevance by 28. So I have a 2028 goal, and every choice I'm making in terms of which exercises I'm going to, which weapon systems we're going to be advocating for. It links to that. How can I defend Canada and North America no later than 2028 decisively? And that's a challenge because we have some obsolescence to manage, but we're getting through it. So for me, those three terms are what are sort of my watchwords. I use them a lot: lethal, interoperable, survivable. And maybe I'll go through them. So from a lethality point of view, we've seen around the planet, our adversaries are essentially undeterred. They're doing what they wish right now. And this failure of deterrence, in my view, is a failure of showing hard power outcomes to challenging someone's sovereignty. So from our point of view, my point of view, we need to be lethal to deter. You also need to be present at a time and place you're choosing to deter your adversary. So that's why I think the tanker is so important.
Mm-hmm.
But from a lethality point of view, I need more than just fighters being lethal. I've talked about it on the CP8A, where I need a long-range maritime strike capability to be a deterrent to our adversary. On our F-35s, I need long-range air-to-air weapons and medium-range and short-range. And I need long-range air-to-surface strike to be able to deter adversaries. So lethality is making sure I have more platforms from which I can apply a lethal effect that would allow me a layered defense for North America. And I think about the 10, the 2, and the 12 as sort of my key areas where I need that. And all of those necessitate a tanker fleet that will pull those capabilities forward. Not really talked about, but the P8 is a boom receptacle airplane. I can refuel that in the air and hold it at a distance that is consequential to adversaries. So lethality. Interoperability, more and more now, you have the compartmentalization of intel mission data and operational mission data, and aligning to be the same platform as our closest allies is extremely important. So platform alignment in the Air Force, for me, is very important, not just to the U.S., but to the Five Eye. So when we look at things, and it's not just U.S. only, you look at the MRTT, that's a European product, but it's operated by the Australians, it's operated by the Brits, it's operated by the French, it's operated by NATO. So you look, when I say interoperability, interchangeability, it's not just can US only. I am looking at the NATO imperatives and I'm looking at the Five Eyes imperatives. And where possible, interchangeability. It would be exceptional if I could take a Kiwi crew from New Zealand and put them on one of my airplanes and vice versa. I know that's a bit of a stretch goal, but we do train very similarly. We're at the same kind of exercises and our SOPs are aligned. And there's user groups now behind these aircraft that push us in that direction. And so I think that's an important aspect because it will allow us a fight tonight capability with our closest allies in which I think we will be standing side by side in a fight.
For sure.
And then last is survivability. I will say Canada has kind of abdicated a little bit over the years in terms of a focus on electronic warfare. If you look at the Ukraine conflict now, signature matters. The amount of your RF, or radio frequency signature of what kind of emissions your platform is emitting, be it a person walking or an aircraft flying or a vehicle driving, if you are emitting, that is a massive risk. And understanding how you can protect yourself from an electronic warfare point of view, to me, that's survivability. It's also tactics. So aligning ourselves in tactics. We now attend routinely with our closest allies weapons and tactics conferences at the top secret level and above, to make sure that how we employ these aircraft is perfectly aligned to how our allies do it and are aligned to what the threat is that we are trying to counter. I'll pause there.
So what outcome do you hope to achieve by focusing on these goals?
So my view is they all aggregate to sort of one thing, which is overmatch. And I don't want to pretend like Canada is going to overmatch the world, but overmatch at consequential time and places where I can have pulsed overmatch over an adversary to be able to either defeat them or deter them. Ideally, it's a deterrence pulse. And if push comes to shove, in the end, our job is to defend Canada, and we will if we have to. And so there's a defensive imperative that I have to anchor this against. And for me, I don't want to be in a fair fight. I want my guys and girls out there who are flying these aircraft to overmatch the adversary and walk into it with a comparative advantage to the adversary in every sort of domain that we operate in.
So why do you think that this needs to be our focus now?
So I think you just need to turn on your TV and watch the news, and that will tell you everything you need to know. If you look at Europe right now, there's a lot of risk. If you are in Europe right now and you're a European, it feels very different than being a Canadian right now. You feel like you're under threat. You're in the weapons engagement zone, the WES we call it, of Russian weapon systems in and around Eastern Europe. You're in Poland or any of the Baltic countries, you feel it.
Mm-hmm.
Our Canadian soldiers who are sitting on the line right now in Latvia, the Enhanced Forward Present Battle Group Brigade that's sitting there, including helicopters from my side of the world, they feel it viscerally. And so we have no choice at this point. The world is becoming far more unstable. We're no longer in a unipolar world. You have a rising China. You have Russia, which is, while they're attrited in the land domain, they are not attrited in the air and maritime domain to any consequential level, and they continue to hold North America at risk. And so we have to honor that. And in Indo-Pacific right now, I worry greatly about the rise of China and what their ambitions might be there and what they may choose to do in the Indo-Pacific that would, I think, dramatically impact economic security for the planet.
Mm-hmm.
So we have, I think, really no choice here. We have to get ourselves up to a place where we are credible, capable, lethal, interoperable, and survivable. Yeah,
it's kind of, how do I put this? It's not necessarily the world we want to see. It's not the world we want to live in, where everyone has to be armed. But this is reality. This is the world we live in, and these are the potential adversaries we have, and we have to be ready for that.
I completely agree. Thanks, Brian.
Yeah. So with this unstable world, what do you think we need in order to establish a credible deterrence at the approaches to Canada and North America?
One is a depth of fighter capability that is consequential, so that we can generate large volumes of them when the need will arise. And what's Canada's comparative advantage from an Air Force point of view? What do we do really well? We do fighters really well in Canada. We historically have. So I say we do air defense really well. I have a whole bunch of air battle managers in North Bay, Ontario, who monitor the line, all of our North Warning System, and they control our fighters across the breadth and depth of Canada. We do air defense well, so we need to do that. And then I think there's a lot of threat coming from the maritime domain now that is not talked about enough in the media. We talk a lot about obviously airplanes approaching the continent. I am far more concerned about very quiet Russian and Chinese subs who are capable of launching sea-launched cruise missiles or ballistic missiles coming proximate to our shorelines. And you did that for a job for a number of years. You have an in-depth knowledge of what's out there. I would say it's a growing threat. And so we need to be out doing ASW actively with our allies. It's a team fight with NATO, with Five Eye, with US.
Yeah, 100%.
And then it drives you down an imperative about personal recovery. So search and rescue in Canada, run by the Air Force, they have a role to play in all of this. As hostilities may ramp up, or at least tensions, if I'm putting air power north to defend the 12 o'clock, 10 o'clock, or 2 o'clock, so will follow search and rescue, because we cannot operate in these environments without sort of proximate personal recovery. So those are the key things I think we need. And then we need magazine depth. I haven't talked about that much, but the number of weapons we have to be able to, if we are pushed into a fight, to sustain that fight for a long period of time, a longer period of time than we historically have held. So the magazine depth matters. The challenge on magazine depth is there's long lead times when you acquire weapons. It takes multi-year delivery times. It's not like a Walmart. We can go and buy something off a shelf.
Right. So speaking as the commander of Canadian NORAD region, why do you think NORAD is more important than ever today?
Yeah, I mean, there's a political layer that is playing out that I'm not going to comment on. And to be honest, it's not the world I live in. I live in the world of professional military relationships with my allies. And I will say categorically, they are unchanged. I work for General Gregory Guillot. He is the commander of US NORAD Northcom. And I respond to him as one of his 3 region commanders. So there's 3 NORAD regions. I work for him as one of his region commanders in Canada. And I will say, irrespective of what you watch on the news every night, there are very sane, very rational conversations occurring Canada to US. I have Americans on my staff. He's got Canadians on his staff, exchanged in a binational command that has been surviving since the 50s. We defend the continent together in every which way. I can fly my fighters into the US cross-border to pursue a track of interest. Similarly, he can Canada with some pre-coordination on both sides, but we do that almost seamlessly. We've just executed that recently up in Alaska on the border between the Yukon and Alaska. And the strength we have of getting each other's backs and making sure that we back each other up is significant. We are a lot stronger together than we are apart. And I would say we need to deepen this relationship. Is probably the most consequential relationship that exists to defend our continent and preserve our way of life in North America. And I'm super proud to serve as part of that. And I would say it continues to be a very successful command between the two countries.
Yeah, I think from a defense perspective, pursuing anything but as strong as possible of a relationship with the United States it just doesn't make sense. That's obviously they're our closest ally, they're one of our largest allies, and they're key to our defense strategy.
Yeah, and I would argue we are key to theirs.
Yes,
for a variety of reasons, not just military but economic, and from a critical minerals point of view, from a energy point of view, we have so many interlinkages that go back 150 plus years. It's really important that we continue investing in that.
100%. All right, so we're going to move on now to questions from the audience. I'd like to thank the Canadian Forces subreddit for their submissions for this part of the show. The first question is technically from my wife and editor, Melissa. You have earned U.S. Army Senior Aviator Wings. What does that mean?
Okay, yeah, that's an interesting one. So when I flew U.S. Army Chinooks down in Fort Rucker and I qualified on the U.S. Army Chinook, part of their process is to award you U.S. wings on graduation from that course. And they award you your wings based on how many hours you have. So I believe I had more than 1,500 hours at that point. And so that qualifies you for Senior Aviator Wings, U.S. Army Wings.
Oh, very cool.
I don't wear them on my uniform. Yeah, I wear them on my mess kit pretty much only. And it's just sort of a mark that I have trained with the U.S. military, and I have qualified on their aircraft, and I serve with them.
Oh, that's awesome. So our next question, and our first from the Canadian Forces subreddit, involves the new trade air ops officers, as well as various new platforms we're bringing online, such as the P-8, the MQ9B, and the F-35C. All of these new trades and aircraft will likely require an increase of personnel, but the PY, or person year, which is essentially our personnel level, has been kept neutral. How will we approach this challenge and avoid doing more with less when many personnel have already been working at a surge level for quite some time, with many trades understaffed?
Yeah, this is a very valid question, and I'm going to do my best to answer it. So one, I think it's important to know where we are now. So where are we now? We're about 1,800 people short of the about 13,000 people we should have in the RCF. The good news is we stopped getting smaller last year and we've started growing again.
Oh, that's huge.
Yeah, I think we grew by about 15, which is the number in April. But if you look at this fiscal year, the CDS just released that we have grown by 1,300 people in the CAF. I don't have the number for how many people that is in the Air Force. I will say the Air Force has been extremely successful in attracting people as compared to the other services. We've done really well. I think we offer a really good value proposition. There's modern equipment coming. We put $60 billion through Treasury Board. It's showing up in the next 18 months, as I just talked about. So people are excited by that and they want to join that. And I love that. So I think there's a path to growth here back to where we should be. But if you look at everything we just talked about, each one of these capabilities, there's a context with that new capability that is different than the thing it's replacing. You likely need new MOSIDs or trades to operate that aircraft. You probably need new support structures, and you certainly need a lot more digital in behind it to make it lethal, interoperable, survivable in the service to the Air Force. So there is a path to growth, and what has not been discussed a whole lot is under the R Strong and Free strategy, there is an intent to grow the military by more, and the CDS has recently released the target is about 14,000 more people in the Canadian Armed Forces to bring us up to about 85,000 regular force.
Okay, so there is a plan for growth.
There is a plan for growth. And I will say there's a bunch of areas in which we have to grow. So we're looking at each thing that we've acquired, and we're looking at how that's all knitted together, and then where each of those personnel growth injections need to occur. The work is ongoing now, so it's relatively quiet, but I do hope to see some announcements coming where we start talking about the downloading of those positions into the services to allow us to grow into these new things that we're getting.
Okay.
As an example, the command support function or the tactical operations centers that are going to be supporting the new P8s. And that's a much bigger footprint than what we currently have from an OSS point of view. But you have a different kind of crew as well. You don't have a flight engineer on that aircraft. Your maintenance might be more dependent upon contracted maintenance. You might have a smaller maintenance workforce. So each one of these things requires a look and a determination of where you would invest those extra people that I think we badly need. And so I'm not saying it's going to be easy because these transitions are always very difficult, but there is a path to grow to grow into our new equipment.
Okay, that sounds pretty encouraging, to be honest. It sounds like there's going to be a little bit of give and take in terms of some things having a reduced footprint, some things having an increased footprint, and it also sounds like there is a willingness to increase that PY as required. So that's good.
100% there is, yeah.
So our next question is, what is OneCAD doing to retain talent? Have they considered keeping corporate knowledge of pilots who are leaving via the reserves? There are also a lot of questions about plans to retain knowledgeable technicians.
Yeah, so I don't have the levers on some of this, right? So the retention initiatives that might be sort of corporately established are not under my control.
Right.
But I do feel the loss of talent on a daily basis, both on the maintenance force, on support trades, and air crew. So what am I doing to retain talent? One is, the narrative matters here too. What is your purpose? If your purpose is defending Canada, and I'm going to put you on a lethal, interoperable, survivable platform, and you're going to execute a mandate for your country, like, it's hard not to get your mind behind that. I do think now, if you look at the world, you can find your purpose in the Air Force pretty easily, looking at the planet and trying to serve your fellow Canadians, doing whatever it is you do in the Air Force, you want to do in the Air Force. Second is, we need to train hard. And so if you look at the kind of exercises we're investing in now, they're different. Like, so as an example, right now I've got about 300 people in Tyndall Air Force Base and 16 of our F-18s, 2 of our tankers down there, and they're firing 26 live missiles over the next 3 weeks. Their whole job is to get themselves up to a point where they're confident they'll do employ air power. And so the kind of things you're going to do in the Air Force matters, and I'm going to try and focus that exercise program to make sure you come out more lethal, interoperable, survivable than you were when you started that exercise. And so that has a retention effect. It did for me as a young aviator. When I went and did something that was hard/fun and linked to my primary mission set, and I felt like more competent to deliver my job afterwards, that retained me. I stayed in the Air Force because that it's sort of like a drug. It's super fun to do that, and it's super satisfying to know you're good at your job. And so that's what I'd like to invest in is making sure that people are good at their jobs, they're comfortable doing what they're doing, and they know they're contributing. And then it's the work environment too. Like, quality of work matters just as much as quality of life. It has to be safe and fun and collegial. We've got to treat people with respect when they're serving in the CAF. We can't have toxic leadership. You can't have scenarios where there's power imbalances. It's got to be very inclusive. And so, and I will say, as I look at the leadership right now, up, down, and lateral in the Air Force, I see a lot of really good character-based leaders who care about their people, who are compassionate, who are empathetic, and who are interested in making sure that you have a great experience working for the Air Force. That retains people, from my point of view.
Not only does it retain people, the opposite loses people. So that's absolutely a key component.
Yes.
So our next question involves air defense. The CAF is standing up air defense again within the Army. How will we approach the potentially risky act of mixing friendly aircraft with friendly air defense in training?
Yeah, so this is a live topic as well. And so, the Army has bought GBAD, ground-based air defense. They bought a really good system. I think it's called the RBS 170. I could be wrong about the number, but it's a SOB system that allows them to do point defense using manned portable air defense systems. Great. Nice to see that reestablished in the Army. Doctrinally, from an air defense point of view, the Area Air Defense Commander is responsible for ground-based fires and for air defense assets. So that would be in the job that I'm holding. So from a Canadian context, if we were to have bigger systems like a NASAMS or a Patriot system that we would acquire, it would be under the ultimate command of this position, of the Area Defense Commander, from a domestic context. So we have the airline interoperability working groups, but I will say there's a very live discussion on this going on right now, with the Army understanding that their role in this will likely be subordinate to an area air defense commander authorizing their fires or controlling it. It doesn't take away from what they're doing. It's just it's a different concept than they're used to working with, which is they own everything inside of a brigade or a battle group maneuver area, surface to X, using the Aerospace Control Center. That was fine for a permissive air environment when the only thing really flying was CAS. It's a very different scenario when you're doing a layered defense, and you have to have all of that coordinated through a combined air ops center, which is what resides here in Winnipeg.
I would imagine that this is a skill set that we certainly must have had it at one point, because we used to have air defense. We got rid of air defense around the time I joined the CAF, probably just before that. So I would imagine that there's got to be some older plans that we can work from to build this up.
There are. The doctrine's there. It's just that it hasn't been exercised by almost a generation of people, to your point.
Right.
And the ADATs left just after the G8 summit. So the first one, when I was flying as a young captain in 2002, And then we lost the gun SkyGuard around the same time. But these were sort of point defense weapons. I don't want to take away from what they are, but they were not sort of theater level defensive weapons like a Patriot or even to some degree a NASAMS could be. And so we have to develop a path forward here. The U.S. uses this thing called a AAMDC, or Area Air Defense Missile Defense Center, AAMDC. I think we're going to have to come up with something analogous, but it takes my Combined Air Ops Center and it plugs it into the Ground-Based Air Defense Operations Center. You can have a deconfliction of airspace and fires that has to occur live and dynamically. And that's a challenging skill set we're going to have to train to it hard as we step up our game here.
Okay. All right. The next one is a pretty interesting question. In terms of reconstitution, which is a big goal right now within the CAF, what tasks, initiatives, or processes has OneCAD reviewed and determined that OneCAD and its affiliated units can stop doing?
Yeah, this is a really tricky one because we haven't been able to stop doing much because there's certain imperatives that you can't get away from. And I would say the biggest challenge for me is the contraction of the workforce down 1,800 people across the Air Force. So you end up in a situation where even if you wanted to make a choice, you would have a catastrophic collapse of a capability if you were to pull a couple key folks out of it. And so we've had a lot of trouble actually making hard calls like stopping doing something. What I can do, or what we have been able to do, is try and apply focus to folks to say, these are all the tasks you're supposed to be able to do. These are the ones I care about a lot. You can go after those key tasks. The rest of it is kind of nice to have, and you can get after it if you have the time, capacity, space, resources. And so this year, I've issued a single operational plan for One Canadian Air Division, and it matches, hopefully, resources to activities. And the intent is to have all my wing commanders sort of review these orders in the next couple of weeks. They're going to read back to me, hey, boss, you've told me to do the following 10 things, but you've given me resources for 5. So maybe I can only do those 5. And then incrementally throughout the year, if you give me more resources, I can get after the rest of it. And that's great. That conversation on risk and activity level, that's what I think we need to have going forward. What I can't do is sort of issue blind orders and expect them to execute.
Okay.
So the process back and forth between my wing commanders and I is I allocate resources and they have to figure out what activity levels they're going to get after. They know what they're supposed to get after in terms of their mission set. I think the challenge is we've never really given them clarity between what level of activity I need them to do and the resources I'm providing them. So now we're finally starting a conversation about, I've given you this much, what can you do? And then we sort of have a back and forth about what will I accept and what will I let them off the hook from to execute. And I can tell you, it's all anchored against lethal, interoperable, survivable, and getting yourselves ready for something in 2028. So I'm privileging continental defensive capabilities going forward. And that is allowing us to make some choices in terms of what we deeply invest in. There's certain underlying things you can't get away from, like search and rescue is a layer of safety for all of Canadians that I cannot give on.
So this is another interesting one. And I think we had spoken a little bit about this a couple of years ago with General Alexander from 2CAD. Does 1CAD plan to implement a continuation flying program to allow pilots in non-flying positions the ability to maintain flying proficiency until their next flying assignment?
Yeah, so my view is this is super important. As a young guy, I got 25 hours a year after I was qualified in Portage to fly civilian Cessnas. Just kept my air sense up.
Oh, really?
Airmanship up. Yeah, it was a program called CFT, Continuation Flying Training. It was outstanding. And so I know General Alexander was trying it. I'm not sure if his successor is going to push it again. I certainly see good utility behind it. I will say it's been tough this year from a funding point of view to try and resource that. It doesn't mean the idea is any less good next year, though. And if things get better, I think this is worth investing in. There's been a lot of work in 2CAD to try and really shorten wait times for courses. That's great news. The challenge on my side is the wait times for operational training units, and they're all quite varied.
Yep.
And so I do think there's still a place for this. Even if it's not in the 2CAD space, it might be in the 1CAD space for me to offer this as folks wait for OTUs. We are feeling the loss of the MOOF, the multi-engine utility flight. Certainly feeling it. So I do think there's opportunity to relook at that going forward.
Yeah, I didn't realize that flight had stopped operating.
It did. Yeah, it's just a financial challenge this year.
Okay.
But hopefully, and we can look at it again.
Yeah. So probably one of our biggest challenges in terms of pilots currently is fighter pilot retention. The fighter community is at the lowest level of personnel of any fleet. It takes millions of dollars and many years to train a basic element lead. What are we doing to stop this loss of pilots, and how will we overcome the challenges that will be associated with bringing the F-35 online?
Yeah, it's a good question. I spend a lot of time on this with my wing commanders right now. We're sort of tracking everyone by name. I will say it may not be as dire as it's been painted in the media.
Okay.
You've probably seen the Bronx report, etc. But it's still a problem, and I want to get after it. And so one is, I think a lot of folks felt the F-35 was sort of theoretical until quite recently, almost. Like I do find when I go to bases and I say like this is coming, people sort of, yeah, sure, it is. We're under contract, the money's flowing, their planes are inbound, we're broke ground on facilities, it's happening. So that has had a bit of an uplift. And now that we've named the first cadre and their backups and the first cadre of students, again, it's quite real for people. So I think that's a big win. My biggest challenge is making sure that everyone is up to the right category to be able to go into the F-35 course, because it's meant for mostly at the one we're going into right now for trained fighter pilots. So it's not as long a course as it could be. And so you got to make sure that you're at a certain level, so many sorties on the fighter, and you're at a certain sort of progression level in terms of element lead as a fighter pilot. And so our focus, that's why I have so many Hornets right now down in the States training hard, is to get everyone their game upped so that they're ready to go into the training system for F-35. So that's one. Two is we're looking at sort of a touring pilot program where I could take experienced fighter pilots who are in staff positions, but give them TD money and the opportunity to fly regularly. So bringing them back from staff positions onto the wings,
okay,
and programming that deliberately, negotiating with their supervisor to say like, hey, this person, they're going to have a consequential impact on mentoring the next generation. So I know they're a colonel and they're working in pick a place. 1 week a month, that colonel is going to go and fly the Hornet up in Bagotville, and we're going to pay for them to get up there or her to get up there, and they're going to keep their currency. And then I'm looking at, if I get new structure, if I get more positions, how can I like vertically layer more experience into the squadron? If you think about the way our squadrons are set up, we have one CO, we have like 4 majors or whatever, 5 majors. There's a lot of experience in there. If I was able to add in a layer of additional experienced captains, additional experienced majors, maybe an extra lieutenant colonel in a squadron as the DCO, you will have the ability to absorb and train people and hold them there longer if they wish to be there. The challenge I find is that it's a high tempo environment, and people and their families get tired of doing constant deployments and everything. So it's a balance. But I will say we're paying a lot of attention to it, making sure they have the right clothing. So we did a big switch last year where we just went to the 27 Papa flight suit for fighter pilots. If you put a G suit over top of our issued flying suit right now, I can tell you those little plastic clips, they hurt your legs a lot. And so just listening to the fighter community and saying like, what do you need to do your job? That's gone a long way. And I think a lot of leadership intervention of like, we need you. This is important work you're doing, defending your country, and goodness is coming. And so I think there's a level of trust that goes back and forth on that.
Okay. So this last one I thought was really interesting. And it obviously is influenced by the current conflict in Ukraine. With the success and low cost of FPV or first-person view drones in Ukraine, including fiber optic drones that are resistant to jamming, why are we not seeing an investment in these in the CAF?
So the Army is going down a path on loitering munitions, which is a version of FPV drone, right? That is, they use the term loitering munition, but the Army has done an acquisition of those, and they're in the middle of that for the Enhanced Forward Presence Brigade in Latvia. So there is some of that going on. I would say in the Air Force, I have not gone down this path yet, and I don't think we need to yet. I am far more concerned about counter UAS on my wings, so that if I have to fight from my wing, I am defending it not only from an air defense point of view, but also from a counter UAS point of view. So we have procured 7 counter UAS systems. We'll be rolling them out at some of our wings this year. And these are RF interception systems that will allow, obviously, a good understanding of what's out there and the ability to intercept it if we had to. So I'm focused more on counter UAS right now. It doesn't mean in the future we won't be on FPV drones. If you look at projects like NTACS, though, and you think about what a standoff precision strike capability would be from a helicopter, if you look at the U.S. Army or the Brits, they're doing what they call ALE, or air-launched effects. That is to say, a drone that fires out of a pneumatic tube attached to a helicopter, and that drone is linked back to the helicopter. So it's an FPV, but from a flying asset, and you can swarm those. So I've seen some demonstrations of this. You can swarm them in terms of ISR, air defense stimulation, weapons. There's a lot of optionality, and they're very low barrier to entry. They're very cheap. The airworthiness piece is new.
Yeah.
You have to work through what that looks like. I mean, there's a bridge to cross there. But I would say the tyranny of just getting myself to the point of being able to defend from a counter-UAS point of view, I have not bridged the next bound, which is be to own or operate FPV. The Army is, though, and they are thinking that way, and SOF has been there for a while.
Okay.
And so they are already in that.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so we're down to our final questions, the 3 questions we always try to ask. You are currently filling several positions and have a very busy schedule. What is one thing you do to stay ready to do your job?
So I think it's sleep. I have young kids. I have an 8 and a 10-year-old, both girls, and they go to bed around 9:30, 10 if they push the boundaries.
Yeah.
And I try and go when they go to bed. And I get up pretty early to do my job, and I'm on the road a lot. And so from my point of view, one is sleep, and whenever possible, PT, and just to clear your mind, because there's a lot of stress in these kind of jobs. I've got a lot of bosses and a lot of things going on in the world, a lot of problems. You don't get a lot of great news in my job. You get a lot of, I have a problem with this. Can you help me?
Yep.
And so I find a little bit of PT and a whole lot of sleep seem to go a long way.
Okay. Yeah. We need to recruit and train many pilots to crew these new aircraft. What traits are we looking for in these pilots?
I mean, first and foremost, the pilots we're gonna be engaging into the RCAF, they're officers. And so I need them to be character-based leaders who are good humans, who will take care of the people we give them first and foremost, and set a good, solid culture so that we do not end up in a bad place from a cultural point of view again. And so I care far more about you as a person and a leader than I care about your hands and feet. At some point, obviously, the hands and feet come into play, and that's where your kind of role as an IP back in the days. So, I mean, I do need a certain sufficiency of hands and feet to cross the boundary to be able to get a set of wings on your chest. But I am far more concerned about who you are as a human, how you will treat others, will you make ethical decisions when no one's watching, and can we trust you with the application of violence on the behalf of Canada, which is probably the biggest thing we can give someone and trust with someone with. And so there's a lot to that question, but I'm looking for highly ethical people who care about their subordinates and their peers, and they are easy to work with. That's what we need.
Yeah, it's funny. You said there's a lot to that question. There's more to it than I realized when I asked it, and I really like that answer. It was not exactly what I was expecting, but I think, I tend to hear, okay, what makes a good pilot? Humble, professional, hard worker, but those values that you're talking about are so key to aviation. Like having a high standard of ethics, like that comes down to me even like, are you going to be honest about if you miss something on a checklist? Are you going to be honest in a flight safety investigation? Things that are really cornerstones to safe flight. So I like that.
That's great. Yeah, good context.
What advice would you give to a pilot who is just starting their training in the RCAF?
Wow. Like what a time to join the Air Force. I'll be honest, if you and I had been faced with the menu of awesomeness that is coming, I think we would have had a really different experience in our careers.
Yeah.
I look at what a young aviator or a young pilot is going to see as they enter the Air Force now, and it's going to seem normal to them that we have all this brand new stuff. That there's going to be, they're going to be walking into hangars that are built fit for purpose, that have all of the amenities you would expect to have in a hangar, that are barrier free. That you can actually take an elevator up if you're injured, that kind of thing. So I'm really excited about the Air Force that they're going to see as they walk in. My job is to build it, obviously with my team. But the advice I have is sort of be aware that this is a pretty awesome moment, and that you're in a pretty specifically awesome generation of young pilot. You're going to have a really interesting choice when you graduate with your wings. You put a set of wings on your chest, and then you look forward and the things you may operate and fly and the environments in which you might operate. It's an extremely exciting time to join the Air Force. We've just completed, or in the midst of completing, the largest recap of the Air Force since World War II. Now is a great time to join the Air Force. For any of our listeners who want to join, every day is a recruiting day, and I would just say we would love to have you join us.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, Chris, this has been quite a journey. That wraps up our 3-part series. I really enjoyed learning about your career and hearing your stories. It was exciting to hear about all the new things coming down the line for the RCAF. And I also really appreciated you taking the time to answer some audience questions from folks who maybe normally wouldn't be able to just ask you what's on their mind. So thank you for your time. I know you're a very busy guy. Thank you very much for being here.
Brian, thank you for what you're doing. I mean, it's just amazing the amount of excitement you generate about air power and flying and being a pilot in the RCAF. Thank you so much for what you do for us.
It's my pleasure. All right, that wraps up our 3-part series with Major General Chris McKenna. We hope you enjoyed it. Tune into our next episode as we start a 2-part series with Pascal Duclos, an aerial firefighter who flies with the Government Air Service in Quebec. Pascal has been an aerial firefighter in North America for many years, fighting fires across Canada as well as the United States, and was recently flying the CL415, fighting the wildfires in LA County. Do you have any questions or comments about anything you've heard in this show? Would you or someone you know make a great guest, or do you have a great idea for a show? You can reach out to us at thepilotprojectpodcast@gmail.com or on all social media at @podpilotproject. And be sure to check out that social media for lots of great videos of our RCAF aircraft. As always, we'd like to thank you for tuning in and ask for your help with the big 3. That's like and follow us on social media, share with your friends, and follow and rate us 5 stars wherever you get your podcasts. That's all for now. Thanks for listening. Keep the blue side up. See ya!
Engineer, shut down all 4. Shutting down all 4 engines.